Welcome to the latest installment of Brand of Brothers. I'm Doug.
And I'm Johnny. Today we're talking about why your logo is not your brand.
All right, let's get to it.
So, Doug, today we're going to talk about branding. What is a brand? What makes a brand versus, I don't know. What do you say? What is a brand?
What is a brand? A brand is a holistic approach to an identity. A lot of people mistake identity as being visual in nature, akin to the phrase visual identity, which is generally synonymous with a logo, but it goes beyond that, right? Because it has type and color, etc. What is a brand? A brand is a multitude of things that must begin with identifying who you are, what you do, why you do it, and the list goes on. We have a brand story, which usually answers the who you are, why do you do it, and for whom do you do it, right? Then we go out broader from that. What's your vision? What's your ultimate goal in the realm of your particular brand? Then how do you get there? That's your mission statement, right? Your ultimate goal is your vision. Your how do you get there is the mission, and you look like you have something that you want to say.
Well, I'm just you're talking about vision and mission, but I think from a business owner's perspective, I have a company. I make widgets, and the name
you
of
do have a company.
I do.
Yes.
Yeah. And the name of my company is Johnny Diggz' Widget Express.
Oh, you changed the name of your company.
I rebranded. Now you just listed mission and vision and stuff like that, and a brand story you mentioned.
Yeah.
But how do you get from Johnny Diggz witches? I think Johnny Diggz witches is better than widgets.
I think it'll sell.
Yeah. So how do you get from that name even? Is the name your brand? Like, is that?
It's part of it, yeah. Right? So it also depends on what story your name tells, right? In your instance with Johnny Diggz' witches, you've told the story, right? Except people then have to ask the question, which witch are we talking about? And how do I get my hands on these witches? And also, are they allowed to? So sorry, this totally veered way off course. So how do you come up with a name? There are numerous ways, right? From a heartfelt place where it's embedding your mission into your name, or it's from a utilitarian place, like naming it after yourself and specifically what it is that you're selling. But
they're two guys in a truck, right? So that's a brand.
It's a brand name.
Okay.
It's not a brand, except they generally tell you what they do in the name.
Yeah.
Right. It's a utilitarian name.
Okay.
For sure, because it's telling you what you're getting by hiring them.
Right.
And it certainly begins to tell the story of what you're getting, right? Two guys in a truck sounds like a moving company, and that's what I believe it is. But then there are instances where it's called Chipotle, right?
Right.
And Chipotle, the only reason why Americans get an idea of what that is because of the marketing that's happened with that brand. But outside of that, especially when they came around, the flavoring of Chipotle pepper was not within the American lexicon, right? This is a name that went through numerous permutations. It undoubtedly had numerous focus groups, right? It was spearheaded by a large corporation. And so that's how we ended up with Chipotle.
Does, I guess, the same could be said for Nike, right? So Nike, I don't even know if that was a word or before, but.
Well, it's certainly a god, right?
Is it? Oh, okay, I didn't know that.
So,
yeah.
and so the I don't know what it's a god of, but I remember something about a winged foot or something to that effect.
Sounds plausible.
And I believe that's where the swoosh idea came from, which that's an even more amazing story about how the swoosh came to be, and ultimately how the designer who created it was ultimately compensated, because initially it was just a small payment that she received in exchange for doing it.
So, but what you're saying is Nike's brand isn't the name and it's not the swoosh.
So it's all of it, right? It is the story of where it is today and where it came from. And
so that makes the brand story.
There are all of these components, right? The logo is part of the brand. It's part of that toolbox, right? And so the tagline that's on the outside of the toolbox might be a sticker that says, "Just do it," right? And then inside that toolbox, you also have an instruction manual. That instruction manual is ostensibly your messaging brandscape, as we call it, right? Your messaging brandscape. What's that? That's your vision, your mission, your position, your tone, your core values, your brand story, the who you are, the what you do, the why you do it, and for whom you do it. All of those particular details. And speaking of who you do it, for whom you do it, you also have your target audiences, and then we have all of our messaging. We have our broad messaging, and we have our vertical messaging. And our vertical messaging is to speak to the services and solutions we provide, and on a targeted level to each of those audience segments.
So you can see why it would be important to sort of identify those ahead of time, because if you're going to spend money marketing, you got to kind of know, I think.
Yeah, it's the why. Why are you marketing? Why are you spending that money, right?
Yeah. I mean, like the idea of putting a billboard up by the side of the road might get attention, but what kind of attention are you trying to get? Are you looking for people who are driving by?
It sounds like you're talking about another episode where we maybe get into marketing funnels, but in that instance, right? Because a billboard is, I generally refer to them as a vanity project, because it's part of an awareness campaign. Right. It can be peripherally part of a conversion campaign, but who is going to be driving by at 45 miles per hour taking a picture of a QR code?
But yeah, that's true. Every time I see a QR code on one of those, I wonder. But but I'm talking more in the terms of a brand. I mean, when I drive around, anybody in this day and age, you see tons of brands, and one of the places you see them is on a billboard. You see,
sure.
John Morgan, one of the huge brand, right?
Absolutely.
Probably the largest lawyer brand in the world.
He is a large lawyer.
He's a large lawyer. But and he has, and so, there's a logo for Morgan and Morgan, but almost in my mind, he is the brand for Morgan and Morgan. Can the person be the brand?
A person can definitely be a big part of the brand. Can they be the brand? It really depends on how it's presented. For the most part, he is definitely the brand, which I find kind of ironic considering the fact that he can't even practice law. But it doesn't change the fact that, there's the and Morgan side of that, which is his wife, who is also an attorney, and then his children. He has a few children that work at the firm. If I assume they're partners, who are also by the last name Morgan.
Morgan.
So it's Morgan and Morgan and Morgan and Morgan. But from a personal brand that transcends into the actual professional brand, of course, that can definitely be a thing.
While we're touching on there, there's I guess some potential pitfalls about tying a personality or a person to the brand. If that person becomes toxic in any way, it can have adverse effects on the brand. For example,
sure.
What's happening right now with Tesla and Elon Musk.
Or what happened with Papa John's, right? So you have people who have made polarizing remarks, and as a result, there are individuals who basically use their personal philosophies to drive how they consume, right? And so when you're talking about Tesla, there is a whole segment of society that is saying, no, I'm not going to support this brand, despite the fact that it generally is a net positive for society. But because of the perceived toxicity that he puts out there, nobody wants to put money in his pockets that make it possible for him to evangelize his ideology.
It's gotten to the further to the point with his X product, which used to be Twitter. He's actually actively suing other brands who
that's right,
who aren't advertising because they don't want their brand associated with the stuff that's being published on his platform.
Well, I mean, could you imagine being Coca-Cola and having Grok say that, something that is Nazi related, that is alongside Coke?
Yeah. Why would they take that risk?
It's a terrible idea for a brand to engage in something that could be potentially toxic, especially on a global scale, right? We're talking about something that is megalithic, and so megalithic brands don't even want to touch it. And then when you're looking at smaller brands, when you're talking about small businesses specifically, it becomes cost prohibitive and then begs the question, why would I spend a few $1,000s a month that might be close to 10% of my net? Why would I risk that alongside a toxic brand?
You mentioned earlier, you threw out the messaging brandscape term.
Yeah.
Can we talk about what you mentioned the things that are in a messaging brandscape. Walk me through the steps of what you do with a client to help develop that. I imagine that's one of the first things that you do.
Yeah, it is actually. So we conduct and what I like to call an abridged brand audit, because a comprehensive brand audit means doing deep dive into research, right? Competitive research and deep dive into what your employees say about you, what is said about you on social media, and so on. So I'm not going to dig into that aspect of the brand audit. So on the abridged side, what we want to do is we want to understand who you believe your audiences are, so we can figure out whether that's even in parity with what data tells us. We also want to make sure that we understand what qualities you're trying to convey. Just a series of adjectives, right? Are you professional? Are you amiable? Are you approachable? What values are important to you, right?
Trust,
transparency, integrity, exactly.
Right.
And the list goes on. So then there are other components that we want to understand. How often do you pay attention to metrics, right? How often do you build your marketing strategy around what your competition is doing? How often do you receive feedback? What does your feedback loop look like, right? So we go through this process of discovery. Then we take that information along with internal research that we do. And that research might be looking at what articles and data we're finding on Statista, to conducting our own focus groups, formal focus groups, based on information that we've been able to derive, right? So we want to know who the target audiences are. We want to know who the target audiences are based on geography, and then expand from there. That gives us a general idea of where we're starting. What is it that the customer, the client, is wanting to accomplish, and who is their customer, right? And how do you connect the two? And that's really the whole point of this messaging brandscape, is that it creates that bridge between the customer and the client.
And from that, then you develop the visual components then?
So you fast forwarded pretty quickly. So once we have put together the messaging brandscape, then we don't move on to the visuals just yet, because we need to know what the marketing strategy is. We need to understand what it is that we're attempting to accomplish, because we need to know where the audiences are and how to reach them. yes, a visual identity is going to be important, but if that visual identity is only on social media, then that's going to have a different aesthetic than if it's going to be a far-reaching brand identity that's going to be something that might not just be in your pocket.
What do you say to someone that comes to Remixed and say, I just need a website, or or I already have a logo and I just need help with my social media? Like, how do you respond, given everything you told me about brands? How do you respond to that?
Well, we begin by assembling all of the materials that they already have, right? So it is, again, back to this informal brand audit. So we need to understand what assets they have and what assets are missing. So if they already have messaging, there's no need to rebuild from the ground up. So, there are plenty of established companies that come to us and require our assistance. Are we going to make them start from zero? No, absolutely not. But if we find along the way that there are opportunities, right? So there are going to be strengths, there are going to be weaknesses, there are going to be opportunities, and there are going to be threats. These are continuous pieces that are evaluated, and when their messaging seems weak, then we would present the opportunities for improvement. And the same is true for their visual language. And the whole point, though, there needs to be a reason, a justification behind changing a logo, for example. Why are we changing it? Are we repositioning the brand? Has our message changed? Have our audiences changed? What exactly has catalyzed this to occur?
I just recently was watching Jaguar came out with a big rebrand recently, and there was a lot of controversy over why they did what they did.
Mm-hmm. And I guessed correctly for the record.
Yeah. We'll talk about what they did.
So basically what they did, it was
Jaguar's is a epic brand, right?
Yes, it was a Fassibly. It was a fascinating case study on exactly what not to do when it comes to a branding campaign. It was a tremendous success in that it got a lot of people talking, but it was an even more epic failure in that we found that the data simply did not back up the decision. And that's what makes these kind of undertakings questionable. In this instance, there was no question in my mind that this was them unveiling their electric and hybrid vehicles, right? They know that they have a classic vehicle with a very specific audience, and that audience is going to age out for them, and that the up and coming audiences for them, their target audiences, their consumers for them,
their brandscape said to them.
Basically they had these old English vehicles and people liked them for being a classic car, right? But people are gradually moving away from fossil fuels toward renewables. And as a result, Jaguar felt it imperative to pivot. The problem is sometimes when you pivot, it's too fast and it's too hard. And if you pivot too quickly, you're going to drop the couch.
There was definitely some couch dropping, I believe, because the backlash over that Jaguar campaign. Although I agree with you, the from all the look of all the new vehicles, they're moving away from that classic look. They've moved away from the classic logo. So all the new colors are sort of bright and interesting maneuver. So as we wrap up here, talking about the difference between brands and logos, but obviously they're interconnected. What would you say to someone who is looking to maybe give their brand a new look, a new refresh? Like how would you suggest they go about it?
The first thing that I would recommend is that they call me. No, the first thing that I would recommend is that they come up with qualitative and quantitative reasons for the decision, right? That it shouldn't just be for the sake of making a change.
It seems like sometimes that brands just do that. And you see that, like, you know, if you look at the history of like all of the logos for VW over the
even
years.
Coca-Cola.
Yeah.
I mean, they even these like subtle
FedEx,
nuance, these changes.
UPS. Yeah.
They've all evolved over time. Part of it is to keep the brand relevant, right?
Yeah.
The other parts are because there is a real purpose, right? When you feel like something needs to change, chances are good something needs to change and you just haven't figured out why.
Right.
And so when you engage with a third party, that can become more and more pronounced and more obvious. And
when you say third party, you mean like an agency?
Like an agency, okay. Yeah, or a brand consultant or a marketing consultant. And
you ever come across when, you know, a new marketing executive, a new CMO comes in and they just want to make it their own, right?
Yeah, that definitely happens, and I've definitely experienced it where it made no sense to anybody except for themselves, and generally hubris and ego shouldn't be the driving factors behind
but many times
a brand reposition.
Like
yeah, for sure, I've definitely witnessed that. But there should be a justification, and that justification often comes about from either reassessing or reaffirming your messaging brandscape. And that messaging brandscape, again, is your vision still aligned with what the long-term ideal is for the brand? And then is your mission, your way of getting there, is that actually in lockstep with how you need to be and how you need to perform in order to get to that ideal place? Then you have all the other pieces that fall underneath that, right? So answering your brand story, the who, the why, the what, the when, all of that good stuff, the how, in any other questions you'd like to ask. But so, yeah, I feel like when it comes to making a brand adjustment or brand repositioning, that it's just important to be introspective and figure out, why are you doing this? And then how should you do that, right? What makes the most amount of sense?
Stop.
I stopped.
No, I was saying, like, you know, it seems like we see a lot of these brands. I'm for some reason I'm thinking of Airbnb, but other ones that seem to come out with a new logo that isn't necessarily that significant change. It doesn't seem like that. It's just like, oh, it's a new font, or it's, you know, they have.
But the thing is that there is purpose behind it. We just might
not see it.
We just might turn our nose up at it because it feels inelegant, right? We've seen this happen a lot, especially with luxury brands. We call it rebranding, where they've gone from having these beautiful serif typefaces or these beautiful script faces that were originally hand done, and then it's simply been replaced with Helvetica. And Helvetica is an amazing typeface, but is it the right typeface? Not for everyone.
That's a good place to end this, because we all know that Helvetica is not for everyone.
Thank you for tuning in to Brand of Brothers. A big thank you to our presenting sponsor, Remix, the branding agency, along with production assistance from Johnny Diggz, Simon Jacobson, and me, Doug Berger. We can't forget music by PRO. Speaking of not forgetting, remember to do that like and subscribe thing, and find us at brandshowlive.com and follow us on the socials at Brand Show Live.